Hello, welcome everyone. Bienvenidos a todos. My name is Juan Flores. I'm a community organizer for the Center on Race, Poverty, and the Environment, and I'm going to be today's moderator. So before I jump into the whole webinar, let me give you some housekeeping announcements. Before we begin the webinar, we're providing closed captions in Spanish translation. If you would like to access the closed captions feature, you will find it by clicking the CC/closed caption icon on your Zoom panel. Captions will show at the bottom of the screen. If you would like to access the Spanish translation, you can find it by clicking the interpretation icon on your Zoom panel. For help with either of these functions, please reach out in the chat to our Zoom Tech Earl, and he will assist you. Si necesita traducción en español durante esta presentación, puede hacer clic en la figura de globo en su pantalla. Again, welcome everyone. Earlier this year, the Center on Race, Poverty, and the Environment, Bakersfield College, Kern Community College District, and the UC Merced Community and Labor Center received a grant to complete what is called the Kern Strategic Workforce Plan. This comes with the responsibility for us to lead a process to create a plan to help bring high-quality jobs to Kern County, along with bringing more equitable economic opportunities in the face of changing employment trends in Kern County due to California climate policies. I'm very excited to see the participation that we have today, the different stakeholders or community members, because this is going to be an important plan that we have to do for Kern County. For the first time, as we're moving to a new and diverse economy in our county, the voices that matter are gonna take charge and lead this whole process. Again, I see community members, I see some building trades partners as well. I believe I see also a few leaders within our communities that are participating today. This is very, very exciting. If at any moment you have any question, please use the Q&A tab or type your questions on the chat box. And at the end of the webinar, we are going to make sure to answer as many, if not all of the questions that you have for us. Before we start, let me also let you know that we're going to be using a tool called Jamboard. We're going to ask you questions during the webinar, and we're going to be providing on the chat box a link to those Jamboards. Click on the link, and then you are going to be able to type on your browser. When the tab opens, you're going to be able to type your comments, your suggestions, your ideas. We want to capture as many of your thoughts as possible. And let me check and make sure that I got all of the instructions before I continue. Cool. So now I would like to introduce to you our presenters for tonight's webinar. From Bakersfield College, we have Norma Rojas Mora. From the UC Merced Community and Labor Center, we have Ed Flores. And from the Center on Race, Poverty, and the Environment, we have Ingrid Brostrom. And with that, I would like to introduce to you Ingrid, who's our first speaker tonight. Next slide, Jesse.
Great, thank you so much, Juan, and thanks everyone for joining us tonight. I just want to start off by giving a bigger picture of why we are here today. It's our hope that after this workshop, folks will have a better understanding of what a high road future might look like, why it's so important that we're planning for a high road future, especially here in Kern County, and what is the process for planning a high road future for Kern. And as this slide mentions, a key to this project is building partnerships with Kern stakeholders. And we really want to center those that are typically left out of conversations about economic development, such as workers and community residents. And we really want to focus on building a collaborative space so that we can all plan for and implement a vision of Kern County, which prioritizes good quality jobs, which are accessible to everyone, while also advancing the state's climate policies and improving our local environment. So in a nutshell, this project is first about building partnership. Two, it's about planning for and creating good jobs for the region. Third, it's about advancing climate policies And fourth, it's about improving the local environment. Next slide. So a quick agenda of what we're going to run through today is hopefully by the end of this presentation, we will have answered the basic questions of who, what, why, and how. We're not going to go exactly in that order. So we're going to start with the why. Why is this project so important? We're going to look at our current landscape in Kern and also the changing future here in Kern. Second, we'll be defining what does a high road even mean, as well as what are our project's overall goals. Finally, we'll talk about building partnerships and collaboration. And finally, we'll end with a description of the process and the next steps we'll be using. Next slide, please. So before we begin, we're going to start with the current landscape and giving a picture of where we are now in Kern, so we can start framing why this project is so important for Kern and why the state has decided to invest in our region. So the next few slides will talk a little bit about the current landscape. None of this should be a surprise to folks, but it's good to recognize where we are now so we can help plan where we want to go and what we need to do to get there. So we're going to be talking about our environment and the state of our employment. Next slide, please. So again, not surprisingly, Kern County has some environmental issues. Kern County tops all the wrong lists. For example, it has the worst annual particle pollution in the whole country. Particle pollution are extremely small dust particles that lodge in the respiratory system, and they're very dangerous for people's health. This is one of the reasons why Kern is also ranked #1 for the highest rate of chronic lower respiratory deaths in California. And the American Lung Association consistently ranks the Bakersfield metropolitan area among the top polluted regions, again, in the whole country. And in addition to the poor air quality here, the region also experiences significant water quality challenges, especially around arsenic, nitrate, and 1,2,3-TCP. The entire region is now experiencing severe or extremely severe drought conditions. And we also have dozens of contaminated sites or brownfields that are awaiting cleanup and currently pose a risk to nearby residents. So this is all bad news. It's also not surprising news. And it's often very difficult to know what to do with this information. It's easy to give up or just despair. However, this is also an opportunity to work collectively to increase investment in cleaning our neighborhoods and environment at the same time as we create quality jobs. The environmental landscape in Kern County presents opportunities to invest in our future by putting folks to work in ways that improve the local environment and the lives of the people who live here. I'm going to now pass it over to Ed to talk a little bit about employment in Kern.
Thank you, Ingrid. Next slide, please. Kern County faces some of the greatest economic disadvantages in the nation. More than 1 in 3 worker households earn so little that they live below a living wage, experiencing chronic and severe housing and food insecurity. This rate is the 4th highest in California, but 2nd highest in the nation for any county with more than 800,000 residents. Next slide, please. So we've got a question for you. Which industries do you think employ the largest workforce in Kern County? Just take a moment to think and enter your response in the Jamboard. Okay, thank you. We've got lots of responses: ag, oil, healthcare. Next slide, please. So the US Census Bureau, with the American Community Survey, the largest source of data on workers in America, tells us that in 2019, there were 371,000 workers in Kern County. The county's 9 largest industries employ 8 largest industries employ 60% of workers in Kern County. This includes agriculture, restaurants, food services, construction and health. The oil industry employs directly 10,000 workers. Next slide, please. At the same time, there's great change in the labor market over time. The previous figure was a snapshot of the Kern County labor market in 2019. But as you can see in figure 2, jobs in the oil and gas industry increased by 40% between the ending of the Great Recession in 2009 and 3 years later in 2012. But by 2019, there were 20% fewer jobs than in 2009. Next slide, please. In 2020, the state of California commissioned a 600-page report that creates a blueprint for advancing on the state's ambitious climate action plan to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 2035. The report, Putting California on a Higher Road, found low road economic strategies to be the single greatest challenge to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. For example, truck drivers misclassified as independent contractors don't have the means to invest in more fuel-efficient technology. The report advances a framework of high road training partnerships to move us towards climate goals. The report states, quote, California climate policy can and should generate safe, family-supporting career track jobs, broaden job opportunities for workers from disadvantaged communities, and contain supports for workers and communities in carbon-intensive industries at risk of decline due to climate policy. We've got a second question now we'd like to ask. What industries would you like to see grow in Kern County? Please take a moment to enter it into the Jamboard. All right, so we see tech, renewable energy, site remediation, infrastructure, transportation. I'll go ahead and hand it over to Norma at this point.
Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, this is Ingrid. Handing it back to Ingrid.
Oops. Sorry, trying to get my video on. Let's see. Okay, there we go. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about our climate policies. So we have a lot of climate policies as we have a worsening climate crisis on our hands. And so in California, there are multiple policies that have been enacted and will be enacted in the future. For example, we have a 40% reduction of 1990 levels of greenhouse gas required by 2030. We have Governor Newsom announcing that all new cars and passenger trucks sold in California must be zero emission vehicles by 2035. We also had the governor just earlier this year announce his intentions to phase out fossil fuel production in California by 2045. And as a backdrop to all of these climate policies, we also know that current fossil fuel production is naturally declining due to the age and quality of oil fields. And so these policies are going to have a real impact on all of California, but especially in Kern County. And we can anticipate that there may be even more aggressive policies as the climate crisis worsens, and we need to make drastic changes in our policies and in our lifestyles. So Kern County is going to be particularly impacted because Kern County produces the largest share of fossil fuels in California by far. And I also want to note that the agriculture sector also will be greatly impacted by the changing climate. And so given this backdrop, we need to plan right now for how we want to direct and invest in our economy, our workforce, and our environment. And now I am going to pass it to Norma.
Thank you, Ingrid. Next slide. And so that brings us to the concept of the High Roads Training Partnership in Kern. And I want to share that for us, the guiding principles of the work that we are doing are really ingrained in inclusivity. The process is worker-centered, and we have shared goals that we've come up with, really with the intent of developing and designing a high road future for Kern County and its workforce. Next slide, please. So at the intersection of this is really ensuring that the high road training partnerships are an intersection that bring together discussion on climate, jobs, and equity. In order to do that, we will need to have participation from a wide variety of sectors in the community to ensure that everyone has a voice at the table as we develop the future workforce and identify industries of growth for this community. Next slide. So what does a high road Kern look like? Well, first of all, we really want to ensure that there are high quality jobs available in the community. We want to ensure that workers are prepared to fill growing industry demand for a skilled workforce. We also want to ensure that the skills needed to adapt and master the new zero and low emission technologies are there. Really what we're trying to do is create more career opportunities for workers from disadvantaged communities and various backgrounds. And so really a high road Kern would create jobs and support workers that may be at risk of losing jobs or need to be reskilled because of the economic transitions. And so really what we're looking at is creating the future. We can't wait to create that future. We need to understand what is coming down and really develop the strategies that are necessary to have that workforce of the future. So we have another question for you. And so the question is, what does a high road Kern look like to you? And please respond to those questions in that Jamboard. And I'm going to turn this over now to Ed.
Thank you, Norma. So what are some examples of high road training partnerships? Some examples from across the state include electrified public transportation, solar infrastructure projects, building efficiency and retrofitting, water infrastructure, and several other jobs in manufacturing, janitorial, and skilled nursing for climate disasters and other emergencies. Next slide, please. One example of a high road training partnership is the Building Skills Partnerships Green Jobs, Good Jobs program. This is up on the California Workforce Development Board's website. The BSP builds systems and partnerships with industry and worker leaders, including building owners, employers, janitorial industry leaders, and SEIU USWW, a labor union that represents janitorial workers. The program strengthens employers' ability to comply with sustainable practices and is marketed to owners of commercial buildings interested in adopting green training certification programs and other building sustainability standards. Green Jobs, Good Jobs offers vocational training in English language and green skills, often blended with financial and digital literacy, citizenship, higher education, and other workforce development and immigrant integration needs. It provides low-income janitors with access to professional development opportunities to advance their careers. It defines and improves skills, standards, training, professionalization, and career ladder opportunities for a largely immigrant non-English speaking population. Next slide, please. And I'll hand it over to Norma. This time I'm getting it right. It is going to Norma.
Thank you, Ed. And so in building this partnership, the Kern Community College District and Bakersfield College has partnered with the Center on Race, Poverty, and the Environment and the UC Merced Community and Labor Center. Additional partners will include the Community Action Partnership of Kern, Cal State University Bakersfield, the Inyo Mono Kern Central Labor Council, SEIU 521, and the Building Trades Council of Kern. Building this partnership was important so that we could have the diversity of voice at the table, but the partnership does not end here. One of the purposes of today's meeting is to expand this partnership and bring more individuals to the table so that we can have a more comprehensive process as we develop this workforce training plan. Next slide, please. Again, what is this process and how do we get to a high road, Kern? Well, being at this workshop is the first step. Really, this is going to be put out in 4 phases. The first is the design phase, where we are developing a needs assessment and survey that will be going out to the community. The next one will be the problem phase, identifying the existing, new, and emergency growth industries and gaps that exist that we can really help expand the workforce in. The next is inviting you to dream big. What can a high road Kern really look like? What are the opportunities and how do we begin to build partnership with that worker-centered voice, with labor, workers, industry, and education to ensure that we have the quality and skills training that is needed. And then finally, the solution phase. We will develop a blueprint, we will develop this Kern workforce strategy, and then we will develop an implementation plan to really address a high road sector and implement within Kern County. So we really invite you to participate and have a voice. I will now turn it over to Juan.
Thank you, Norman. So obviously having 2 educational institutions present, we are gonna have homework for you, for all of you. So how can you get involved? Well, first of all, if you can fill out the needs survey assessment, that's on a volunteer base. They put them on the chat right now. You can find it in English and Spanish. That would really, really help us out. Also, if you can volunteer for an interview with us, that would help us find other things that we might not be aware of when it comes to the workforce of Kern County. You can join us for future workshops to provide your input and ideas. This is barely the introduction of this whole program, of this whole process that we have embarked, and that we really need you to also pass the word to your friends, to your colleagues, to other community members, other stakeholders that could help us, draw the plan that imagining big for Kern County. Because at the end of the day, Kern County is the place that we call home and that we love. So how do we make sure that we're doing the right things for Kern County? You can also join a sector-based work group to provide your input and ideas. And again, pass the word, tell your friends. And for more information, you can contact us at the email that appears on your screen at this moment. And just to finalize, remind you again, if you have any questions, please go ahead, put them on the chat, put them on the Q&A portion, and we would be more than happy to answer any of those questions. Now you would also receive another link for a survey about this webinar. So you can give us feedback of what can we improve for the next webinars and workshops that we're planning to do. So with that being said, if you have any questions, one more time, I'm making the offer. Go ahead and type it on the chat or on the Q&A, and we would be more than happy to answer them. Yes, please do give us your feedback. We want to hear from you. And let me check the chat really quick and see if there's any questions.
Hi, everyone. I'm Stacy, and I'm going to be moderating the question and answer portion. So it looks like we have a question here. How can organizations get more involved besides attending workshops? Ingrid, would you like to answer that?
Yes, so we have already planned several opportunities. So the first thing is we're going to be collecting information. So that's the first step. We have the needs assessment survey that was put out in a link. We're going to be trying to disseminate that to as many people in Kern as we can. We want to hear from as many stakeholders as we can, just to get a sense of what people are experiencing in Kern, what people's opinions are. We're going to be using this data to really see where there's interest and alignment on where we need to dive deeper. What are the sectors that are really rising to the top that seem exciting for people in Kern? And then we're going to dive deep. And so there will be sector work groups where people that are interested in a particular sector can really dive into what are the obstacles, what are the opportunities, what do we need to do to promote these particular sectors that we want to lift up. And so there's going to be these bigger work groups where we collect information, and then there will be this more targeted work group process where, again, we really want to hear from folks and do the deep thinking so that we can come up with the plan. So to summarize, please fill out the survey. We will also be doing one-on-one interviews with some folks. And then also, as we develop the sector-based work groups, please, we're going to need people to participate. We're going to need critical mass to do the deep thinking to get us the answers we want. And I don't know if anyone else wants to add anything to what I said.
Thanks, Ingrid. I see that we have another question about, are we talking about vocational training, wind and solar, engineering, green energy? I think the question is around what kind of jobs and training might be coming out of this process. Not sure who would like to answer that one.
I'll take it on, Stacy. So as we're looking at training, we're talking about everything, right? As I mentioned earlier, we want to really dream big for Kern. So it's not just vocational training, it is developing pathways. It is upskilling current workers, could also be reskilling current workers. And so really, as we begin to define the industry sectors, it really is going to help us develop the blueprint of what types of training or education is needed. And so that's what we think is really exciting about this. It is really an opportunity to redefine what Kern County looks like.
And I'll jump in as well, if that's okay. So traditionally, workforce development has been done in such a way where there is engagement with industry leaders, with employers, and we hear very little from folks that represent workers, from labor unions, from worker organizations. And so with this model that the state is adopting in its efforts to make good on ambitious climate goals, folks from disadvantaged communities who typically wouldn't be represented at the table of workforce development are now being encouraged to join. And so this is the mechanism through which that would happen. And so folks that normally wouldn't be talking about what they understand in terms of quality jobs and how to improve jobs, the need, right, for upskilling among certain demographics and certain occupations or industries. We're going to be convening folks to have those conversations and to see, where there's interest, where there's shared interest among different stakeholder groups, as Ingrid was mentioning.
Thank you, Ed. There is a question about the fossil fuel industry in Kern County and what role are they expected to play in the Kern High Road Coalition? Any takers on that one? Norma or Ingrid?
Yeah, sure. I mean, as a coalition, we would expect the fossil fuel industry to come along and engage in the conversations. I mean, it is Kern County. This is affecting all of us. And so we want to hear from the different perspectives, especially workers as we begin to look at a diversified economy in Kern County. So there's a space, I think, for everyone to participate in these programs and in the various sectors as we begin to evolve and develop those sectors and conversations.
Yeah, and I want to echo that one of our values and principles here is inclusivity. And so we want to be very true to that and invite everyone in Kern to the table so that we can have robust conversations. I think the climate policies that I talked about, those are real, and there are inevitable shifts in the fossil fuel industry that we will be taking into account. But that, of course, we invite everyone to the conversations, and including the fossil fuel industry. And when we say industry, we also very much hope that the fossil fuel workers have a voice as well. As shifts happen, we definitely want to make sure that we're not leaving any part of our workforce behind, and that there's pathways for everyone in Kern that may be affected by the climate policies and changes that'll be affecting our economy.
Yeah, so much of the public discourse around improving the climate and improving job qualities takes us beyond the local. When folks talk about the way that extractive mining has really done a lot of damage in West Virginia, with the way that communities are dependent on these extractive industries that go through boom and bust. The concern is always with the workers. And what support is going to be there for workers beyond just the community? What is it that the rest of the nation owes, to these coal mining communities, right, that have long done the work, that have supplied the energy needs of the nation? And so, in the same way, we need to think big. And this is about identifying areas of shared interest between different stakeholder groups, but as well, posing the questions and asking, what supports do workers in Kern County need in order for there to be justice? And so some of those questions are going to lead us to recommendations that are beyond the local, and really are involve policy levers that are at the state or even the federal level.
Thanks, Ed. There was a question earlier up in the chat about the role that CSU Bakersfield is going to play. I think they were listed as one of the partners. Norma, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, so CSU Bakersfield is going to be helping us with outreach to some of our industry partners, as well as helping with some of the research aspects of this. So they will be working in conjunction with the UC Merced Community and Labor Center in defining exactly what gaps exist and bringing that local information to the table as well.
And then I see a question, what type of feedback are we interested in? I'm not sure exactly what that's referring to. Does anybody want to try that?
In terms of feedback, I mean, the assessment that is in the link is really important to us. So I think in terms of feedback, responding to that, I mean, again, we provided the information to our, where you could ask questions directly via email. Feedback is every types of feedback. We want to do this right, so we want to hear from you. The assessments are really important. And then the second thing is, providing that assessment to your networks. Again, helping us to do that outreach and ensuring that, we're getting that out to communities is really important to us.
There's also a question, is there any way to ensure that those green technologies aren't exploiting workers in other countries in similar ways that our workers have been exploited in mining valuable minerals? Ed, is that something that you can address?
Yeah, we're developing a rubric for for identifying high road employers, or at least higher road employers, because we want to engage with those folks who are already doing work at the intersection of creating jobs, improving job quality, having good jobs, and what's good for the climate. And it's no secret that the state has subsidized forms of economic development that have been low road in some cases, in many cases. The sorts of like ways in which workers are exploited. And so, our concern is with making sure that we're learning about the need for the demands, right? Industry demands, the way that the industry is going to change over the next 10 years and where the need is for skilled workers in communication with high road employers. So we'll be developing that rubric and that'll be a way of engaging with, with folks from industry or employers.
Thanks, Ed. Let's see, one more question pop up here. For the needs assessment, so it looks like someone's connected to the survey. On question 8, to choose 3 sectors you would like to see grow, the survey only lets you choose 1. Okay, so we need to fix that.
Thank you. We'll fix it right away. It'll be fixed in about 10 minutes.
Hello, this is Earl Parsons from Bakersfield College. I see a question here from Jasmine Martinez, where she says, this is an exciting opportunity for the community. I would love to see ways for local youth who represent our future workforce to be included. How are youth being connected to these conversations?
I'm going to say, I'm hoping twofold. One, I can speak for sure. I know that Bakersfield College is engaging its student population to participate in both the survey and in these workshops and in the future in the workforce sectors that we develop. But in addition to that, I think really getting the engagement of students at the high school level and through other community organizations that focus on youth is important to us. And so we will be spreading the information and really ensuring that they have an ability to participate as well. Because you're absolutely right. They are the future workforce, and getting their feedback and input is really critical as we develop the plan.
There's also a question here about what is meant by the term stakeholders. Can one of you explain what's meant by that and who that includes?
I think we're trying to be very inclusive with what that term means. It means who has a stake in Kern County. And we intend to define that really broadly. We really do want to reach very large segments of Kern County. And we really also want to target and be very intentional about reaching hard to reach populations and make sure that everyone can be included in here. And so, yeah, so we mean the term to be interpreted broadly. We are focused on people that do have some connection with Kern, but we also recognize that, even regionally and statewide, that Kern is important. And so again, I think the bottom line is inclusivity. And if you have opinions on the future of Kern and want to be involved in framing our future, we want to hear from you.
Not sure if we're going to have any more questions pop up here. So Juan, I think I'm going to hand it back to you.
Wonderful. Well, if there are not any more questions, let me see. There's one more comment on the chat. Oh, thank you, Lisa. There's a lot of suggestions and comments by Lisa, so thank you. We'll take those into consideration. And if there aren't any more questions, I think this is the end of our webinar today. one more time just to say a huge thank you to all of you who participated and attended our first webinar. We know that the majority of you, all of you, have busy schedules, and to end your day with us, that is very grateful for us. One more time, thank you to all. Thank you to our presenters. Please stay alert to any emails that you may receive from us on future workshops. We really, really want to hear from you. Please do fill the surveys, and you also have the Jamboard links. If you still want to put your thoughts on them, please feel free to do so. They'll remain open for at least for today. With that being said, thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Bye-bye.